So today I want to offer at least one perspective on this whole Kamala Harris calling J.D. Vance weird thing. A seemingly offhand statement that became a mantra of the campaign and eventually began to influence the free-thinking newsfolk who are definitely not automata. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll play this supercut. I got it from Russell Brand. It looks like that it might actually have originated from someone else, but I'll credit Russell Brand because I don't know the actual origin.
He and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
These guys are just weird. That's who they are.
As weird and creepy as J.D. Vance.
Super weird idea from J.D. Vance.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's quite weird. They're just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
That stuff is weird. They come across weird, and then they start being weird. Yeah, they're weird.
Being a really weird.
He's such a weirdo.
Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate, they're weird. Deeply and profoundly weird.
They are weird.
These Republicans just being weird, it's just weird. It's really weird.
Republican weirdness goes even deeper.
He said a lot of things that are weird, a weird style that he brings, weird policies. Let's start with the weird thing, because it is a thing.
Just plain weird.
What was weird was his talking about Diet Mountain Dew. Who drinks Diet Mountain Dew?
You ever seen the guy laugh? That seems very weird to me that an adult can go through 6.5 years of being in the public eye. If he has laughed, it's at someone, not with someone. That is weird behavior.
Weird and cultish.
These are weird people on the other side.
He kind of doubled down on his weird ideas.
I think weird is probably generous.
Simply weird. These guys are just plain weird.
Vance as weird?
You know, as the campaign said, weird.
It really is just plain weird.
J.D. Vance, plain weird.
No, I mean, I don't know how else you could read it.
Weird. It is kind of weird.
We're not afraid of weird people.
The other side, they're just weird. Why are you being so weird?
Vance has done something more extreme, more weird.
No matter what kind of weird stuff they keep saying.
Trump and Vance are just weird, in addition to being dangerous to democracy.
That's the weird part that's the most engaging.
Whom he addressed as my beautiful Christians, which was super weird.
Weird tech bro, J.D. Vance.
He's a weird guy.
J.D. Vance, uneasy and sort of weird.
Frankly, for lack of a better word, that he's...
So as you can see, the gist is that Kamala Harris leveled this attack against J.D. Vance, and then broadly at the Trump campaign of being weird, and then sort of everybody in all of what's being called the legacy media followed suit. And so, to their credit, no small part of this is likely just people responding and covering the fact that it was discussed, just like I'm doing right now. And if I were included in a supercut saying the words weird, it would be kind of inaccurate. I'm just telling you what happened. I'm not echoing the idea of it. But the implication of the supercut is that once it was said by Kamala, the weird thing began to be echoed by Waltz, by the media, and by everybody on the left, more or less. Since then, many articles have been written. It's become popularized. Trump and J.D. Vance have responded to it, and their responses spawned more articles and commentary, often with dismissive and mocking tones. If you believe pollsters, and I'm not saying you should, the Trump campaign is losing steam, and the Harris campaign is gaining steam. So this weird thing seems to have been a pretty decent move. So what I want to talk about is what it means and why this move worked so well for Kamala's campaign. That is, what is the culture whose ears it fell on, and what does this accusation mean, and why does it work so well in that culture? Now here's a hint. Whether or not Trump and Vance are weird is not the issue at all. Harris' campaign did not win this exchange because people were just sitting around going, golly, these guys are weird. They're just so odd. I can't fathom their actions. Of course not. That's silly. Now, there's people who might think that they're weird, but the narrative overall has never been about weird. It's been about jerk, liar, moron, racist, sexist, etc. Vance was never a weird guy when he was first announced. They experimented with all sorts of narratives. Well, he's not a combat veteran. Well, he's very rich, not like Waltz. Waltz is only middle class, and that's just super. Trump and Vance may well be weird, and they may well be a threat to democracy. They may also be wonderful, normal fans of democracy. I don't know. But the idea that everybody is just culturally resonating, searching for the right word to express their opinions of Trump and Vance, and then finally they heard the word weird, and everybody goes, by Jove, that's it. I've been looking for something to call these guys. That's obviously not the case. But I also don't want to go so far as to say, as I think Brand is saying, well, this was an orchestrated effort and it's resonating with the culture because the cultural elites that are in the legacy media and such are pushing it on the culture in a top-down fashion. Though that does have a bit of a nice ring to it. Instead, I actually want to look at this phenomenon irrespective of whether or not the accusation is true or false. What I mean to say is, the reason it works is because the culture is ready to receive that sort of accusation. As a matter of fact, J.D. Vance, when he claimed that it probably originated with 24-year-old social media interns, was probably onto something. Almost certainly this slogan did not come from Harris or Waltz themselves, but from someone who really has their thumb on the pulse of social media culture. And if you've got your thumb on the pulse of social media culture, you might have intuited, even if you've never articulated, that cancellation is out. It's not cool to cancel people anymore. The game's been exposed and it's not fun anymore. Everybody knows what's going on with cancellation and its acceptability is on the decline. Now that's obviously not a universal statement. There are certainly some people perfectly willing to cancel others openly. But by and large, I think cancellation is being replaced by what I'm calling trivialization. Now, for this next part, I'm pretty heavily inspired by the work of Jean Baudrillard. But I'm really only focusing on one concept of his that I think most people would agree with. I understand that he's a bit of a controversial figure. But I'll do my best to express this concept in such a way that you don't really need to have read any Baudrillard to get it. And the relevant concept here, and it's been applied to social media many times, I'm not breaking any new ground, is that excess of production is problematic. Specifically, excess production of signs, but I don't want to get into what he means when he uses the word sign. But think of it in terms of content. Social media is sort of the apex of this excess of production anyhow, so it works. There's constant content being distributed all the time. You're always waking up to new content if you're on social media, and it's curated in such a way to keep you coming back for more content. But one other implication of this is that the speed by which things become naturalized or normalized or institutionalized has increased exponentially. So something edgy or new is rendered common, mundane, or normal, and it becomes part of the culture and is therefore neutralized from wielding any real power. Now, think here by analogy the phenomenon of Super Saiyan in Dragon Ball Z. It was this legendary, overpowered, galaxy ruler overthrowing ability that became a child's plaything by the time the Cell saga was over. And by the time Dragon Ball GT and Dragon Ball Super came around, it was more or less irrelevant because we'd already seen Super Saiyan 3. We were going to see Super Saiyan 4. We were going to see Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan, and all that stuff, and then Ultra Instinct, Ultra Ego, and so forth. So what's happened is that social media has trends, and we all know that term. The internet causes things to emerge quick in an impactful, emotional way, and then they vanish as quickly as they came. And the only constancy on social media is that everything moves fast and everyone's a jerk. It's like we've culturally mantled the wisdom attributed to Solomon, by legend, not in the Bible, but it's commonly attributed to him. This too shall pass, he supposedly said. But this is like the most perverse iteration of that phenomenon. For a while, cancel culture was everywhere, and it was happening in earnest. People were authentically trying to cancel people all the time for whatever they could. To quote some guy whose name I forgot, who was quoted by Mark Champagne, and I'm not actually quoting, I'm paraphrasing. Quote, "Never before have so many been able to affect so much with so little risk to themselves." Unquote. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, and the chance for ordinary losers to roleplay as people with power, so long as the algorithm deposited sacrifices at their feet. It's sort of like a resurgence of honor-shame culture and the ritualistic sacrifice, but without any of the cool lore or interesting figures. I think the shift away from cancel culture began to occur once everybody started to openly mock it for being, as they would say, lame, sad, and oversensitive, and outright aggressive and often erroneous. Open mockery became an attempt to cancel culture. And I think this sort of started to rise, especially in political spheres. So cancellation is, at least at its base, an attempt to force malcontents off of social media by either getting them banned or by making their social media life miserable enough that they leave for a while. Now that's not the extent of it. Sometimes it's just to be mean. Sometimes it involves employers or real-world relationships. But it's never not hoping to eject someone from social media, even if there are other hopes. And it's very difficult to argue these days that the public square takes place in a more relevant way than social media. In fact, there's been a handful of scholars who've made this point, probably more than a handful. The new public square is social media. And so cancel culture is saying, I want this person to be out of the public square as much as possible. I don't want their voice to be heard. What cancelers would do once operationalized is bombard somebody. They would problematize something they've said or done, maybe even unearthing something years in the past and expose it to the world, hoping to get everyone else to bombard them as well. Then the person would be flagged for that controversy, and maybe they would get off social media because it's all so negative. Maybe they would get fired or lose an opportunity. For example, maybe they're an actor or an actress, and a movie deal would be lost. Maybe they would get kicked off the social media platform outright because whatever they said was just too bad and too controversial. Whatever happens, it's an attempt to kind of put these people away and silence them. The key I'm trying to describe here is that when folks would try to cancel somebody, it was very aggressive. And then people realized very quickly that, as everybody realized, that social media is fueled by engagement, and negative engagement is of higher value than positive engagement. So if you can get people to cancel you, you can get engagement and make money. So becoming a provocateur became much more normalized. A really, I think, telling example of this is, I don't know if you remember, circa 2015, Ben Shapiro really critiqued Milo Yiannopoulos for basically being solely a provocateur. Now, compare that to 2024, Ben Shapiro sitting right next to Matt Walsh and getting ready to produce a movie where Matt Walsh goes undercover at DEI rallies or conventions or whatever, and the movie's going to be titled Am I Racist? It's nothing but provocative, incendiary content, very far from the sort of open debates that Ben Shapiro became famous for. And so cancel culture was really having to deal with a bit of an identity crisis. How do we continue to shut people up without becoming pawns in their little provocative money-making scheme? So I think that what we need to look at here is the phenomenon that is Eminem's album, The Death of Slim Shady. Specifically the great release, Houdini, a very catchy tune. And the social response to it is a great exemplar, if not the leading edge, maybe it's at least a pretty good example, of the emergence of a suitable alternative, the preferred alternative to cancellation, and that is, again, trivialization. Okay, so Eminem drops his single as part of the new album, and essentially in the single he accuses people of trying to cancel him. The narrative arc of the music video is that a version of him from 2002 comes through a time portal into a wimpy world these days, and just starts saying a bunch of controversial stuff that everybody these days would be too scared to say. Okay, great. So people started to run with it, create a few posts, how this is a response to Gen Z trying to cancel Eminem. And I don't know whether or not that happened. But I am old enough to remember 1 year ago, or less, when everybody in Generation Z seemed to be full-scale enjoying these sort of intergenerational feuds, where they would diss every other generation all the time. Millennials are cringe, boomers are cringe, and so on. They actually gave Gen X a bit of a pass. So I was very eager to see this interaction play out. Ooh, a generational war is coming, I thought. It sure seemed promising. Gen X was on board. They said, that's it. Eminem is simply too precious to us. We will not be silent anymore. We've been playing it cool until now. So then this trend emerged called Gen X Rise, where they would put an X on their face and say things like, there's a storm coming to Gen Z. You guys asked for it. You shouldn't have come after Eminem. It's very cringy. And I was hoping Gen Z would miss the cringe and just counterattack. But alas, they did, as most of us did, and they couldn't help but laugh. They actually went a bit further. Gen Z's response was essentially to say, whoa, we're not canceling anyone. What are you guys doing? Oh no, that's very sad. Calm down, nobody's canceling Eminem. Nothing like this happened. Now again, whether or not Gen Z is, to use their terminology, gaslighting everybody, I don't know. I assume there was probably some generational stuff occurring.
Gen Zers called for Eminem to be canceled over his history of controversial lyrics. It's a battle of the generations here, setting social media on fire.
If you on a Weezer-ass rap, bro, you're fucking cooked.
I would certainly not be surprised to hear that some member of Gen Z did in fact try to cancel Eminem, but members of Gen Z are actively saying, hey, it's a few people, there's a few bad actors out there, but you can't generalize that to us. That's stupid. In fact, generational feuds like this are just stupid and cringe. Now again, this is despite the fact that using exemplars to attack other generations was the modus operandi of the internet for so long. Very recently, Gen Z decided that the game was over, and as a result, the whole game of cancellation had to begin coming to a close. Note that I said begin. This seems to be a transitional period where the preferred method of silencing others is shifting. I don't claim that you won't still see people getting canceled tomorrow, but what Gen Z did here was avoid fighting back openly against Gen X's Gen X Rise. They didn't go, Eminem, we're going to shut you down. Instead they said, hey, we're vibing and chilling. We're cool, no problem. And this is tantamount to saying, I have no further engagement with this thing. You do you. Now that sounds like they're just being cool, but the problem is, this emerged as a result of a meta-awareness of the way that the public square operates. Don't forget that we learned during the height of the cancellation wars that engagement is engagement, positive or negative. All press is good press. All that matters is whether people care enough to transmit your content ad infinitum. So what Generation Z did here is said, and this is what trivialization is. It's not demanding that you need to stop talking and get out of the public square. That would be too open, offer too much energy, and be too open to rebuttal or mockery. However, it aims toward the same overall social effect, which is, we don't want to engage with you and we're letting others know that we don't care to engage with you, with the very obvious implication that if you do engage in this controversy baiting, you're a sucker. And who wants to be a sucker? This is obviously also a form of engagement, right? So it can help to perpetuate things for a while, but remember that to take advantage of cancellation, you want that exchange. You want the fight. You want to win support by having folks feel that they need to come to your side and stick it to the other side. Imagine a chess game where your opponent walks up while looking at their phone, lays their king down and with a smirk says, have fun, and then goes on their way. The fight's been taken away. You've been made the butt of the joke. There's no honor in continuing to play a game when your opponent already declared you the winner. Better yet, imagine you invite all your friends and family to a tournament of some kind, let's say wrestling, and you're an underdog. You've been training your butt off, but you end up with a bye in your first two matches, so you're finally going to get a match. It's a finals match, and your opponent steps onto the mat and says, I'm sorry, I have to use the bathroom. You win, I'm sorry. And they run off. You would never take pride in that victory. And if you said, well, I'll own it, I'll wear the medal with pride, you've lost your edge as the gritty underdog and you've had to repitch yourself as the funny goofball instead. There's no actual glory in the medal. Now let's say you didn't get that memo and you started screaming, yeah, run, I win. Your friends and family probably wouldn't love that, but let's say maybe your closest friends and your closest family, they join in. Maybe they're a little off kilter just like you. You'd still likely have a hard time gaining and retaining new fans who still think of you as that gritty underdog, when your brand is gritty underdog. In this case, Gen X are the family and friends that failed to get the memo. Eminem is the guy who's standing on the metal podium talking crap to the empty spaces to his left and right. It's a laughable image, and that's the plight of the modern provocateur. That's what Harris's 24-year-old social media interns picked up on. Trivialization aims to take energy out of any potential extra momentum that a provocateur was hoping to gain from a controversy. It's also worth noting that I don't care can be expressed with those words, I don't care, sure, but it can also be expressed more broadly with dismissive actions and statements. So don't think just because you don't say the words I don't care, you're not trying desperately to express that you don't care. So trivializers would say, we need to express that we don't care. Let everybody know, and we'll deflate this controversial movement that's trying to feed off of our negative engagement. And as much as they're able to succeed, they deflate your, and here I'll pretend that you're the provocateur, they deflate your incendiary actions and reduce your overall engagement. This is functionally equivalent to you falling out of the public square. It's you effectively being silenced within the public square without the aggression that came with cancellation. They trivialize what you say so you're not able to get everybody riled up and therefore able to spread your message further. That sort of politics is exactly where Trump has historically always thrived, and it's being phased out. The new politic is more subversive. It frowns on the open aggression. The Harris campaign is not allowing themselves to become an opposing term in a dialectical engagement with the Trump campaign. And you can speculate on the motivations behind that. It could be that they're reading the room. It could be that perhaps Harris is just a dud of a candidate who would never thrive in that sort of situation against Trump. Who knows? But this is a fantastic move because Trump is a puncher and a counterpuncher. He loves to be on the attack, and so does J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is like a pit bull. So Harris and Waltz are just going to skirt around the immediate argumentation and try to render any attacks inert before they come. If you're weird, and weird here is a dismissive thing, I understand that hasn't been the case for the last several years. But all of a sudden, weird is okay as an insult again, so let's just play ball. If I call you weird, and it succeeds, I can convince people you're weird, then your messaging now needs to overcome being dismissed before it can be debated on its own merits. Michel Foucault, again, another problematic postmodern thinker, just stay with me, adapted the word episteme to refer to the preconditions of thought, the rules of engagement. So think here of AI, for example. The programmer sets the parameters, and thus the AI's thoughts are bounded by the parameters. Harris is trying to shift the episteme of this election from a field where Trump thrives to a field where he doesn't thrive. And I'm not judging. That's what she should do. I'm just pointing it out. But I think it's just a fascinating thing because when you look at it through this lens, you can start to kind of see it everywhere in the culture. It's not new in itself, but I think what's new is its prominence. Trivialization is becoming the de facto mode of expressing discontent with a thing. You can't just say, well, that's despicable, you need to stop. That's what every opponent on the whole internet wants you to do, so they can go viral off of your name. Now you have to express discontent at a distance. Even more than the distance that's already built into the whole interface of screens and usernames. So just one more cultural example. A recent video making fun of Elon Musk by Ryan George, who I actually really like. I think he's very funny. He made fun of Elon Musk, and he embedded some critiques about him and his whole persona in there. Now, this is no problem. This is what comedy people do. It's what they've always done. The interesting thing is not George's parody, but the micro forum it encourages within the comment section. In the comment section, people can come in and say things outside of the comedy, but using the comedy as a jumping off point to express their general disdain for Musk while maintaining enough detachment to avoid getting pinned down and still sort of maintain this intellectual distance. So here's an example. This guy says, oh, you forgot the part where he says, I've eaten 2 sandwiches with a pretty big pickle in them, so I know more than anyone else about sandwiches with a pretty big pickle in them. Now to clarify, the sketch that George did was about a store that sells sandwiches with a pretty big pickle in them, and that is used as a stand-in for Twitter, which Musk obviously purchased. And so the commenter is using that scene to express his political opinions. But George had to craft the scene comedically. The commenter isn't bound by being funny. He doesn't have to be funny. The rule of engagement is just, this sketch is a critique of Musk. And the comment section follows suit. It uses the form of the sketch to veil the substance of the argument. So that they're not actually making an argument. They're participating in fictional world building and having a good laugh. And nobody can hammer them for that. This is the separation of the idea from the self, and it allows the commenter to distance themselves from what they're saying. If I were to reply, for example, and refute specific points from the sketch or the comment, they would say, oh, you're an Elon fanboy. In Ryan George's sketch, he had an Elon fanboy follow Elon around, agree with everything he did. So were I to come in there and try and earnestly defend Elon, I would be categorized as the fanboy and trivialized, and I would have a very hard time getting through. I might be able to do it, but it would take way more effort than if we were just on even ground. So how can I approach these people and not have a cringe cast on me? Well, I would have to come to them on the terms they're using. I have to submit to their rules of engagement and argue from behind a veil. In this case, I would have to employ the same parody and probably use some laughing face emojis and some good old tongue-in-cheek mockery to express my earnest political opinions. This is what the metamodern theorists out there are calling ironic sincerity. You should look it up. Not bad theories. I like what they do. And what I find, unfortunately, is that in metamodern theory it seems like more often than not, when they talk about ironic sincerity, which is the idea that people have some earnest stuff that they're trying to express, but they do so through irony, they kind of talk about it in positive terms, like, man, people really want to express themselves. They want to say nice things, like, I love you, man, but they just don't know how to do it, so they have to hide it behind some ironic sentiment. They have to use humor to detach themselves. They have to be a bit snide, a bit sarcastic, add a little bit of edge, so that people don't think that they're cheesy. That happens. But what I find is more often the opposite. Ironic sincerity is more often employed in masking expressions of aggression rather than kindness. When applied to debates, I think it comes off as intellectual cowardice. It's being tongue-in-cheek about everything and constantly playing the fool while also trying to be taken more seriously than a fool. It wants the jester's liberty to critique without being the butt of the joke or losing the respect of the court. I think it slithers around direct confrontation so that no matter what someone's arguments are, they have to be heard by listeners as just a little bit weaker than they would have been otherwise. Sometimes a lot weaker, depending on how dumb the listeners are. I think it's straw-manning for people who fear being accused of straw-manning. It's not an insurmountable obstacle, but it's an obstacle. To trivialize successfully is to bring an opponent into an environment where they do have to overcome triviality so that they have to assert themselves as serious in spite of it. And this has to be done in a culture that can only express itself in a tongue-in-cheek manner. So it's a doggone losing endeavor to try and say, well, no, this is serious. I'm serious. Take me seriously. We need to be serious for a moment. That's a uphill fight. I don't envy anybody who has to do it. Yep.
And that's all I have to say about that.